I was like lying in bed before I'd said it out loud to anybody. And like, it was like I had the image of me behind me pushing me off of a cliff and going like, you're going to figure out how to fly on the way down.
From the news team at LinkedIn, I'm Jessi Hempel, and this is Hello Monday. It's our show about the changing nature of work and how that work is changing all of us. And today in the studio, we have Anna Kendrick. Now, my guess is you know Anna. She was just 12 years old when she was nominated for a Tony. She was in the Broadway show High Society, and she's pretty much been acting ever since. She has this incredible comedic timing. She's got an amazing voice. I loved her in Up in the Air. My kids loved her in Trolls. In fact, they listen to it still in the car all the time. And then there was her incredible turn in Into the Woods. But the thing that we're going to talk about today, well, it's actually something that happens to a lot of us, right? When you get to the middle of your career. The thing is, Anna's been doing the same thing for a long time now, almost 3 decades. She'll turn 40 this summer. That's a lot of years of acting, and specifically playing the roles that the world has become accustomed to see you play. So when you're known as really an expert at one thing, how do you venture out and try something new? Well, for Anna, that new thing is directing. This past year, she made her directorial debut on Netflix. The movie is Women of the Hour. And if you haven't seen it yet, pause right now, go to Netflix and watch it, because we're going to get into it. You won't regret it. Listen, this movie, it's about an actress that crosses paths with a serial killer on a dating show in the 1970s. In this conversation that I'm about to have with Anna, well, it's happening at a ginger time, right? She is in the middle of the pivot. She is here with us waiting to see how the world is going to receive her in this new version of herself. I think after you hear this conversation, you, like me, you won't be able to help yourself. You will root for her. Here's Anna.
In a way, even though I've like written a book, this feels like the most vulnerable, revealing thing I've ever made. And then there are like, there are a handful of things from my life that I like threw into the movie, like in one of the opening scenes when I'm in the casting office.
Yep.
And the 2 casting directors like make a very kind of specific reference to my chest.
Yes.
I just asked them to do that on the day because I was like, this happened to me in an audition when I was 19. So I like verbatim put that conversation into the movie.
If our listeners are listening to this and haven't seen the film yet, you know, it begins and we are with you, the main character, Cheryl, and you're in auditions in LA. And I will tell you, I thought, well, I mean, Anna couldn't have been in that situation because she was already famous at 12. Isn't that how Hollywood works?
Oh my God. No, I wished very much at the time, but no. Like it is interesting the way you kind of maybe mythologize your own career trajectory. And I actually remember when I was writing my book, I actually did this event with Martin Short. And I, must have mentioned that I was like in the process of writing the book and that I was, I think at that time, particularly in the process of writing about those periods of your career where you are down to your last dollar and you just cannot catch a break. And it's a very like humiliating time of your life.
Sure.
And he was sort of like, I think for now, like print the legend. Like it's fine for you to not fully detail like those very unglamorous, unsuccessful points in your life. I kind of took his advice and I kind of didn't. But I think that there is something incredibly vulnerable and perhaps wrongly or not, a bit embarrassing about like, well, I was nominated for a Tony when I was 12 and, there I am at 18, 19 and like nobody's interested in casting me for even like a guest spot on NCIS or something. So it's a complicated thing to sit with.
Well, I wanted to actually spend a moment on that period of your life because you have been acting now for almost 3 decades and you are not yet 40. You are just getting started with your career, I have to tell you. And early on, after you had that first success, I'm curious what the sort of self-drive was that kept you working toward a goal, or how you would even describe what that goal was in the moments that you're describing now when you were a young adult?
Yeah, I will say, like, the further that I get from it, the more that I am kind of amazed that I went after this dream. And I don't really know what to say about it other than it just felt like there wasn't another option. Like, it felt like this is what I was going to do. And so there wasn't like a weighing of pros and cons because it was out of the question that I wouldn't pursue it. Like it would be like asking me to stop blinking or breathing or something. And there was a real endurance test of like how much rejection and how much kind of hardship and how much, paying bills late and stuff can I tolerate before I throw in the towel.
Was it a love for the thing itself? Was it a sense of personal identity? Or was it something larger that you maybe can't even name?
It might fall into every category, but I would say that there is something about performance for me that has let me learn so much about myself. I feel like that magic around art, whatever that art may be, is a kind of driving force because, what are we here to do if not know ourselves?
Yeah. Well, I think our careers can be such powerful vehicles for knowing ourselves deeply, right? Particularly those of us who work in anything that touches creativity, which actually is expansive beyond the arts. And I'm always interested for people who have had success quite early in their career. I've had a professional French horn player whose mouth gave by the time he was 28, or an Olympic swimmer who had to then recultivate like a new aspect of his life by age 30. How do you come to yourself and your creativity newly while we around you kind of want to see you do the same thing a lot?
Oh, that's so interesting. Oh, my goodness. Yeah. I was speaking with someone who has also had an incredibly successful career that would be envied by anyone. But he and I were kind of bonding over this thing of like, I feel a little trapped by that thing of going, well, I don't know if there's a way for me to keep doing what I was doing in 2012 without either like changing course and alienating people or continuing the course and having people go, is that all you got?
Yeah.
And I'm sure that can be true for anyone in any career. And certainly for me, like even when I raised my hand to maybe direct this film, people who've known me for 20 years were like, I always thought that you would direct something, but I thought it would be like a musical romp. This is really dark. I'm asking a lot of the viewer to go on a kind of dark journey with me, of all people. But certainly even putting the film together, asking all the cast and the crew to go like, I know this isn't exactly my wheelhouse, but this is something that resonates to a deep pain point inside me and that I feel like I hope I can do right by.
It's that moment, that precise moment. That's a magic moment. It requires confidence, and it has so much possibility for rebirth in any career, and certainly in yours.
But I'd also like to bring in that I was far from confident.
That's the thing.
It really, I mean, it's one of those, like, I feel like this has been said in so many, movies trying to capture that thing of like, well, courage isn't the absence of terror. It's, doing it in spite of the terror.
I actually want to explore like this moment. Like, first of all, like just tactically, how did you get to directing this film?
So I got this script actually possibly like the same week that I got the script for Alice Darling, which was also a real departure for me. And it was at a moment in my life where I was just coming out of something really traumatic. And so I was not resonating with lighter fare. And so I was really excited to find these pieces, and they really spoke to me. And Alice Darling managed to kind of get off the ground and film pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. And then this one, as many films do, I attached myself as an actress, and I was just sort of waiting for like 2 years. And then the other thing that happens frequently is that after 2 years or so of not really knowing where things stand, like very quickly, it's like, hey, we have a start date. And so if you keep the train on the tracks, like the money will stay in place and the start date will stay in place and you can actually make the movie. And when that happened, we found ourselves without a director. So then we were scrambling to find someone, and we were certainly not looking at first-time directors because we were going, okay, this is a moving train. We have about $2 in a roll of duct tape.
And
so
when you say
who
we,
can,
just
and the producers.
yeah. Okay.
And then really it was like that feeling that when you're gonna like vomit, where it was like, oh God, it's coming up. Like I'm gonna say I want to pitch myself to direct the movie, and I kept like trying to stuff it back down because it was so scary. But I realized I'd really been kind of obsessed with the script for 2 years, like, you know, trying to just wait and see what happens. And I'd been secretly having this feeling of like, well, if it were my movie, I'd maybe take that thing from that draft of the script and do this. But, you know, it's not my movie, so, you know, it's not for me to say. And then like a day later or something, I was pitching myself. And it was like the weirdest, most ambivalent pitch probably in the history of cinema. Because I was like, pitching myself, but going, guys, if this isn't the right thing for the movie or you don't think that I'm ready, I shouldn't do it. Because I really wanted to do what was best for the movie. Because I think that for me, I know that this is like generally accepted as a good thing, but I loathe false confidence. So like I want to be honest and I want to work with people who can make room for that honesty.
Right.
So I was really delighted that almost all the producers were on board, even with my very ambivalent pitch.
I love this idea of like honesty or your attempt at honesty, right? But confidence, I've always thought of as a bit of a misnomer. Confidence is what you say after the fact when you look back at something that's happened. Before, you just have to find someone to push you into the void of something new, right?
Yeah.
So,
well, by find someone, do you mean
or something inside yourself?
It's just funny that it's funny that you say the void, because I was like lying in bed before I'd said it out loud to anybody. And like it was like I had the image of me behind me pushing me off of a cliff and going like, you're gonna figure out how to fly on the way down.
Well, so how does that work if you are both this main character in the show and also the director? Like where do you stand? How does that work? And if you need to be in scene with someone, how does that work?
Yeah, I'd had the experience of being directed by an actor-director before, at least John Krasinski. So I'd experienced how like it's a little awkward for a second, but it's actually not that awkward when you're in a scene with the director and then he calls cut right in your face. You just get used to it. When I was pitching myself to direct it, people were like, are you worried about doing both acting and directing? And I was like, I'm really worried about directing. But the acting is like, it'd be like asking me, like, are you going to remember to blink? Because I know we're talking about the word confidence, but as someone who performs on film, I operate from a platform of confidence purely because, like, I've just been doing it for long enough. And sometimes I do think that a lot of that actual confidence has to just come from experience.
I think that you know, I'm a writer. And I often say that craft is 98% of this. And doing something over and over again in the company of people who are better than you and can help you be better at it is what will make you good at it.
That's right. Yeah. No, and obviously what I mean to say is not, I think I'm the most talented actress. It's like, no, but I know that if you hire me for a part that makes any sense to have hired me for, I know that I can deliver and I know how to do the job. Right. And I've talked to like Jake Johnson about the difference between acting and doing the job and how he and I both really came up trying to get really good at doing the job and being the best coworker that we can be to, you know, every department.
Sure. And that is why at this moment in particular in your career, now that you know that you can do that, taking on a new challenge, I would think becomes not just an exciting new thing, but almost existential, like a need if you're going to be able to build out another 30 years in a career that has creative value to you.
Yeah, no, completely. I'm trying to feel good about the fact that I can't remember the last time I felt this unsteady and sort of scared about the next chapter of my life.
Yeah.
You know, I really kind of settled into showing up and doing the job and feeling good about that. And there's something absolutely bone-chilling, terrifying about feeling like, oh, I just got to a place where I felt really confident as, someone who shows up on set and knows how to do the job. And now I'm doing something that I have no experience in and am like learning on the fly. And yeah, there are times where I'm like, Anna, why did you do this? You were doing fine.
What are the important skills involved in being a director that were really new for you?
A thing I was really nervous about was whether or not I would have the ability to adjust for whoever was in front of me. Because I think that sometimes I can be a bit of a bulldog. I feel like I'm very nosy and very opinionated, so I always want to know like exactly what's happening. And I'm always like shouting out, what's preventing us? Like what's the holdup? What are we doing? Like I just want to know what's happening. And I can like get into a rhythm of just being like, let's go.
Yeah.
And I wasn't really sure if I would be able to adjust for someone whose process was a little more even keeled but I was also so in love with the cast and crew that it felt natural to just meet them where they were at. I actually remember Jake Johnson from New Girl. He was directing his first feature, and I got to kind of ask him, like, what's it been like for you? And he was like, oh, the best thing is that because you are the person assembling the team, you're going to think it's the best set you've ever been on. And you're going to look around and be like, isn't this the best set you guys have all ever been on? Like, everybody is so cool and amazing. But it's because you've hand selected the people that you're working with. And so, like, of course, I thought it was the best set I'd ever been on.
Well, does it become a bug? Is this now that you have had an attempt at this, is this a path that you want to aggressively turn down?
I would love to direct more. And I will say that it's fascinating the way that actually now my imposter syndrome is probably higher than it was before we started making the movie, because you go, well, this was a fluke. It was
an accident.
Yeah, this was a total accident that this happened. And, anything good about the movie was somebody else's doing. And,
Is imposter syndrome a phrase that you have turned to many times over the course of your career?
Probably. But but again, like right at the point that I was like, I actually am really confident about turning up to work and knowing that I can land the plane. Right. And then I go and do this. So I sort of blow up all of that security blanket.
I wonder, like, how do you think about feedback? Like, where do you take the feedback that matters to you? Because this will be released into the world, right, and so many people will have ideas about it, and you will need to use those ideas to shape whatever you do next. Do you ignore 98% of them?
I will say I have not read a review in 14 years, maybe 15 now. I'm just too sensitive. That's that. But I was very grateful to have feedback from people that I trusted as I was putting the movie together. The most helpful notes were from filmmakers and friends who were very sensitive about just really trying to lay out what exactly the problem was and trust me to come up with the solution. It was like a very therapist-y thing,
But I think maybe that's what good feedback is, right? Good feedback is not imposing your own answer, but reframing a question so someone can hear their own answer.
Yeah. I think that's right.
Well, so I do want to talk about the material itself, because you were the one who framed it this way at the start. It's dark, right? This film explores a serial killer, but actually in a sort of lovely way. It doesn't. It explores a culture around a serial killer.
Right.
We never learned that much about him. And
right.
We aren't actually that interested in him.
Yeah. That makes me happy that
Way
you said
to
that.
go. You said this film drew on some some personal motivation for you. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah. So I had, an experience that I'm sure many have, where the person that you love and trust most in the world begins to hurt you in various ways. And it's a real life-altering experience. And this movie, to me, really explores that betrayal and that sense of annihilation. The opening scene is really upsetting, and it takes place. It's just two people on a hilltop, and at one point, the producers really wanted me to put it in a nightclub or so, and I felt really strongly that it should open in this way, because to me, there's something evocative about the idea of intimacy as both the most beautiful thing that we get to experience and the most terrifying.
Yeah.
And it felt representative of the way that you can be in a beautiful place on this isolated hilltop and feel like it is the most beautiful and restorative place to your soul. And then in an instant, it can become the most terrifying place to be. You hear a coyote howl in the distance, or you realize that you're lost and it's a dangerous place to be. And that feels like what intimacy is putting yourself before another person and risking so much of yourself.
Yeah. It struck me as I and in that open, that moment in which somebody goes, and I can think of experiences in many parts of my life, not just my romantic life, where I have felt this. You're confident in the moment and in the closeness, and then it flips, and you can never look back. It can never feel or look the same.
Yeah.
Right? And it felt to me like you revisited that over the course of the film. What did you want us to understand about that?
I think that the goal for me was to kind of reflect the danger and the paradox. Really, I keep using these words like trap and setup, because I think that at the very least, when we're wrestling with those experiences, the thing that's going to keep us stuck there forever is that layer of shame over it, that layer of, why didn't I realize sooner? Why did I stay? Why did I trust that person? And that the idea that in the movie, it's like, it doesn't matter if you're the sweet girl, the tough girl, the open, vibrant girl, the vulnerable girl. You cannot guarantee protection from someone who wishes to do you harm. And really trying to make even the way that each of these women meet this dangerous person different, so that it never feels like there's a perfect path to safety. And that sounds nihilistic as I'm saying it, but again, I think the goal is mostly to take the onus off of the victim of self-shaming.
I so appreciate that you bring up shame, and it strikes me that we as women, we kind of need to believe that she did something and it's her fault, because if we don't believe that, then we have to accept that it could happen to us.
That's exactly right.
And that's terrifying.
Yeah. No, and I've touched on this in the past, but that I have real shame about the fact that before something like that had happened to me, I think I had that belief too. I said that I didn't, and I sort of intellectually knew that I didn't,
Yeah.
but I think I did. I think there was part of me that just thought it could happen to anybody, but probably not to me.
Right.
Yeah. And I have sympathy for that version of myself, and certainly empathy for people that might still be there, because that's just a survival mechanism. It's absolutely paralyzing to not sort of tell yourself, just to get through the day,
Right.
that won't happen to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And look, life is not linear, right? It's expansive and circular, and our life expands in front of us in ways that we can't expect. And I think your movie invites us to think about that too. You said that you read the script in Alice Darling around the same time, a couple of years ago, and you were really wrestling with this then. But now it's a few years into the future. What is it like to be in your thoughts from 2 years ago today?
I'll say that even in the process of making this movie, I found a very parallel process happening in both my personal thoughts and in preparing the movie, which was there's almost this gravitational pull toward focusing on the other.
Yeah.
There's a maybe false sense that if I can just figure out what is going on with that person, like why did they do it, what's their psychology, and even your own thoughts start to center the other. And I think also that's almost a protective measure to avoid your own grief and your own pain. And there were times when I would feel myself getting really curious about the killer and wanting to go down that path. And like the scenes would really stop working. It was really fast. It was really fascinating.
Oh my gosh.
The way that like
so interesting.
Once it was like, oh no. What we're going to do is we're going to start this sequence with Catherine. We're not going to start it on him on the street. We're going to start it with her in her apartment. Like, and suddenly like the whole sequence starts to work.
Right. Does it start you down a path in which you think that you will continue to pursue more serious dramas, or do you hope for a career that spans the gamut?
I mean, I'm always interested in like varying projects, but I'll say that it was actually interesting. Like the only scripts I was really responding to, even pretty recently, were like almost like increasingly dark. And I was like, what is going on? And then this is so corny, I feel embarrassed, but I had like a really good session of therapy, and it really was like, you have those like breakthrough whatever. And I suddenly started responding to scripts that had like not lighthearted, but had some levity and had more of energy and kind of a forward propulsion or something. And I was like, wow, it really is like an art imitating life moment, because it is a bit of a reflection of where my head is at personally.
Well, the coolest thing you just said there is this idea that you pay so much attention to what you personally are responding to, that you understand that if you follow that energy, that can be the through line for the choices you make.
Yeah. But again, it's very vulnerable.
No, I think it takes most women until well into middle age to figure that out.
Okay, thank God.
I mean, I don't know, and I don't think you're there yet. I'm like at least 10 years ahead of you, and I'm barely figuring it out. But I could really go down a path here, but I'm not going to, because our time is wrapping up. So, Anna, I have to say I'm looking forward to future directed films.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And it's great to have you in the studio. Thank you so much for
Thank you so
coming
much for having me.
That was Anna Kendrick, actor and director. Her directorial debut, Woman of the Hour, is on Netflix now. You should check it out. And listen, there is so much that I want you to take away from this conversation, but really there is one big idea. And that is the idea that no matter what you have done so far in your life, when it is time for you to pivot, to try something new, even if you are an expert and well known at the thing that you do, it will be scary to take the leap. And listen, people will say be confident in doing it. Confidence, we've heard, only comes after the fact. It comes from repetition, from doing things over and over and over again. Confidence is what you can say you had when you look back on something you have already done. But the truth is that leap is scary, the leap into the unknown. You cannot de-risk risk. It is inherently full of chances to fail. And what you can only learn by doing it is that the failure is its own gift. It will teach you something, and it may just teach you where you can succeed. Now, if you loved this episode half as much as I did, if you loved hearing from Anna, why don't you share it with a friend? Text it, send a link to the show, whatever works for you. And if you want to talk more about it, well, you should join us at office hours. Every Wednesday afternoon at 3 p.m. Eastern, our senior producer, Sarah Storm, and I get together on the LinkedIn news page. We grab our coffees, and we invite you into the virtual room. And so many of you come every week. We have a lot of regulars, you know who you are, and a lot of new folks who pass through. Or there's always a link in the show notes. I'm Jessi Hempel, and this is Hello Monday. Thanks for joining us this week. It was great to have you in the studio.